Before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody to turn their phones on silent, and as a case in point that I just did not do, turn your mic on during roll call and when you have a question, please. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Mills,
I'm here in person.
Senator Webb, Senator Wheeler, Representative Bridges,
Here in the room.
Representative Flannery, Representative Tackett Lafferty,
Present in the room.
Co-Chair Howell,
Present in the room.
Co-Chair Meredith.
Present in the room.
Okay. I believe we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is review of the minutes from the August 25th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Is there a second? Do we have a second to approve the minutes? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. At this time, this isn't Punk the Chairman Day or anything like that, is it? Every day is that way, right? I'd like to get our first group to come up with the Ohio Motor Vehicle System. Would you please come to the podium and present your presentation and identify yourself, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jason Wilson. I am the president of the Kentucky Auto Dealers Association. And one item I want to mention before we get started, we did have on the agenda Sarah Bruce of the Ohio Auto Dealers Association to be on here. She had, unfortunately, a death in the family and is not able to attend this morning. But if we have questions that need to be followed up with, we'll certainly follow up with her. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the task force. KADA is very pleased to be a part of this modernization task force, as this is a subject our dealers are very energized about. They very much want to see a more efficient way to title vehicles in the near future. This step, after all, is the most important step in selling a car for both the car dealer and the consumer. Before I get into some more specific items related to the subject matter at hand, I would like to begin by sharing what the current makeup of car dealers is in the Commonwealth. I did have a slide. I don't know if that's able to show up, the one mentioned driving Kentucky's economy. If not, I can just sort of read some of the key statistics here that would be of interest to you all. First, as far as new car dealers go, the Commonwealth has 230 new car dealerships approximately.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir.
We just need to set this up to share the slide,
Okay.
and then we'll be good to go. Don't ask me how to do that. I just know it needs to be done.
Say it.
That's why Josh has got it. He's the first.
No. That's the next program. Mine was just a one sheet, single sheet. There we go. All right, there we go. I don't know if you can scroll that up a little bit, but I'll just sort of go through this briefly, as it's important to understand our current makeup. As you'll see, and this information comes from NADA, and this is based on 2020 numbers, but they're not dramatically different. So we're looking at approximately 230 new franchise dealers in the state. That accounts for just under 28,000 jobs created by the dealerships throughout Kentucky. Some of those are directly with the dealerships. Others are in support of the dealership operations. The average employee count per dealership is 55. And in 2020, the number of total sales for all dealerships was $9.5 billion. The Kentucky auto dealers make up a $745 million payroll. And you'll see an average annual earnings for those employees at $58,435. State and federal income taxes paid $213 million. Kentucky's share of total U.S. new vehicle registrations is right around 1%. And Kentucky auto dealers pay $570 million in state sales tax. So felt that was important just to sort of set the table and familiarize you all as the way our membership is set up currently. As a driving force in Kentucky's economy, dealers are a vital part of our state's overall future growth. The workflow process in dealerships, like any business, has an overall impact as to how effectively any retail operation can run. Over the last year and a half, the pandemic exposed some major flaws in the current system. Inconsistent processes, hours of operation varying by county, delays, all become major concerns to our dealers. As there currently is no electronic system in place, it became very challenging for dealers to perfect a lien within the required 30 days as spelled out by federal bankruptcy laws. This is still a challenge as clerk's offices are intermittently shut down or have reduced staff due to surges in COVID-19. Having an electronic system in place where dealer personnel can effectively begin the titling process would be a major step in the right direction to alleviate that issue. Ultimately, what our dealers are looking to do is to be able to electronically produce and file vehicle registrations and title transfer documents with the appropriate county clerk. In recognizing the importance that we need to find a path forward that works for all parties involved, KADA has begun dialogue on this initiative with the county clerk's leadership. Those initial steps and conversations have been productive, and we all agree to continue this open and honest communication as things progress. I believe most agree it is important to move forward in this endeavor now. It is time to do what our neighboring states have done years ago and take those first steps in embracing a technology that has been available for decades. Car dealers have to embrace technology every day as this industry evolves and advances. They do so willingly, as it is vital that they provide an excellent consumer experience. Another challenge is the dealer's ability to hire title clerks. It's a very difficult job and is very labor-intensive in its present states. All of that said, KADA is not here to cast any blame. We believe all involved are doing their best to meet the demands of dealers and consumers. KADA is simply here to say the current system is flawed and we can and must do better for our citizens. Today's conversations are part of this journey towards modernization we all should want. So let us turn the conversation as to what a solution could look like. Where can we go from here? What other states are doing this? Is there a pathway we could potentially follow? I'll begin by saying electronic titling is not something new and unproven. Electronic titling has been around for over 30 years. In fact, most of the states that touch Kentucky are doing and have been doing electronic titling for years. Virginia, where I come from, has been doing it for over 30 years. So the good news is there is a model and there is a proven path forward. Now, each state is unique, and what we have been doing over the last several months is studying our neighbors. Some states have a DMV, others utilize the clerk similar to Kentucky. So we have chosen to look specifically at the Ohio model. Ohio uses clerks of court models similar to Kentucky. We have shared this example with clerk leadership, and I know they are looking into this further based on our continued discussions. And in fact, within the last week or so, they took a field trip to Ohio, and my understanding is they've had some very productive conversations, and we're able to see how that system is utilized. So we're off to a good start from that standpoint. I'm pleased today to have our friends from Cox Automotive join us via Zoom. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Cox Automotive, they are one of the largest automotive companies in the world. They are leaders in electronic titling in the U.S., and they have a tremendous knowledge as it relates to finding solutions unique to each state. Vendors like Cox Automotive would be an important part of this process moving forward. So at this time, what I'd like to do is turn this over to our friends at Cox Automotive, and they'll be able to talk through, at least at a very high level, a potential roadmap moving forward. So let me begin by introducing Dan Pulliam. He's the Senior Government Affairs Manager, and allow him to introduce the team. And while Dan is doing that, if we could get that other share screen for their PowerPoint up at this point, that would be great.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Dan.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Jason, for that warm introduction. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to appear before this task force to talk about electronic solutions in the registration and titling field. My first task here will be to introduce some team members that we also have on the phone who will support any question and answer period that I may not be able to answer. And the one thing we've learned about this industry is it's constantly changing, constantly innovating, and we are constantly trying to find ways to improve it. And so from that perspective, it really is a partnership and a team effort. And so co-chairs of the task force and members of the task force, I want to take a moment to introduce my boss, Sarah Hunsaker, who's on screen now on video. Sarah's been handling reg and title issues for a number of years now, and is the Director of Government Affairs for our team at the reg and title operations for both registration and titling solutions and collateral management solutions. We also have on the phone with us our Senior Association Alliance Manager, Polly Pena. Polly has joined our team, has vast experience over decades. I won't say how many, Polly, but decades of experience in the automotive industry, and she comes with a wealth and a depth of knowledge that's wonderful inside the industry. We also have with us on the phone Colleen Voorhees. Colleen also has decades worth of experience in the electronic lien and title field and the registration of vehicles, and serves as the senior manager of government affairs as well. And so we've got a great team assembled here. We've been talking to Jason for a while now about ways in which we might be able to assist in various ways. I'm not sure if that PowerPoint's ready to go there, or if you want me to share my screen.
Probably just share yours, Dan. Would be easiest if you're able to do that.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. We have a few slides just to move through real quick, and I know we did provide this PowerPoint presentation yesterday evening to the LRC so that members could have it. And if at any point in time you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This is just an agenda of what we're going to cover today real simply, and Jason highlighted most of this information already. As Jason indicated, Cox Automotive is quite large, over 30,000 employees worldwide. The names that you'll recognize here out of the many brands we have are Mannheim, our auction locations, inventory solution, Auto Trader, obviously retail website handling large numbers of transactions in large volume. Kelley Blue Book is the other name that you will see in addition to DealerTrack that makes up our suite of services and business opportunities. Our most recent venture into the mobility space with some new services there, and a lot of this is looking at how we deal with a large variety of autonomous vehicles, those kinds of things. How do we service those industries, and where we go from there? But today we're here to talk to you about how collateral management services and registration and titling solutions are two of our core businesses at DealerTrack that interact with the states, with dealers, with lenders. From a collateral management perspective, we have programs known as the Electronic Lien and Title, ELT for short. I know various government agencies love acronyms, so we do as well, have a whole book of them. But we started in the ELT field in 1989, pioneering this operation in California, and have been going ever since. So we've now hit 50% of the country that actually have ELT enabled in their states. As Jason indicated, this is not new. It continues to innovate. We continue to do things new that we haven't done before in ways that we've never done them. But we serve about 6,600 auto finance lenders across the country, and we actually have in our possession in either electronic or paper format about 60 million titles on any given day. On behalf of those lenders. And then on our registration and titling services solution side, we did pioneer this electronic registration system back in 1990. Was a great opportunity for us. And since then, we've been able to expand quite rapidly across the country. We're now into 16 states. We just launched Minnesota earlier this year. So we have been adding states. We have about 28 applications, including temporary tags, that make up part of those solutions. And again, we build these systems based on what the state law, state requirements, and what the process and workflow requires in each of those states. So those are custom built applications that we put together for those states. We service about 7,000 independent and franchise dealers on the registration and titling side. Just to give you an idea, Dealer Track in whole for all of our operations has some connection to about 20,000 dealers across the United States, and so from that perspective, we have a vast amount of knowledge about dealer operations and how those processes work. We do about 10 million transactions across the country each year in the registration and titling solution side. Just to give you an idea of, what does it look like across the country in terms of electronic lien and title, ELT, and electronic registration and title, sometimes referred to as either ERT or EVR, which is electronic vehicle registration. So we have about 50% of all the states, 25 that have ELT installed. And those connections, and we do work with county clerks, clerks of courts associations in the various jurisdictions across the country. And that represents about 72% of all registered vehicles in the United States. And then we also have electronic registration and title. About 52% of the states now have it in some form, and that's about 78% of all the vehicles that are subject to registration in the country. To give you an idea of what state adoption looks like on those states that border Kentucky, as you can see, almost all the states surrounding you, with the exception of Tennessee, have some form of electronic processing related to titles or registrations. Illinois has both programs. They will have both programs. We expect them to be operational in 2022 for ELT. Indiana, electronic reg and title for a number of years now. ELT should be coming sometime in 2022. And Ohio, electronic titling and ELT is there, which is the model we will discuss in a few minutes. West Virginia has an ERT system. They're working on some new titling programs that should be coming out shortly. And then in Virginia, where Jason is from and has indicated, ERT and ELT has been been in that state for a while. Missouri just passed a new law this year creating Modernization and a motor vehicle technology fund. And so from that perspective, Missouri will also be joining the fold in addition to these discussions that we're having in Kentucky. And we have done some presentations in the past with Tennessee as well. So again, these systems have been out in place for quite a while in various forms. We continue to innovate them and continue to work with those states to build those programs. And then, one of the key things we want to bring up as part of this process, and certainly in Ohio and the other jurisdictions where we work at the county level, in addition to working with the state, is preserving and protecting the role of the clerks. These electronic registration and titling programs, electronic lien and title programs, simply allow just technology to continue to make the process better, to make folks more efficient, and to make sure that these systems are secure. First and foremost, just want to really reiterate that all of the latest technology about usernames, passwords, protecting those things in various states who require it, multi-factor authentication. So all of these systems are protected and locked down in terms of which users are allowed to use them and how they control that process. And so from that perspective, we want to make sure that these systems are not vulnerable to various attacks, but also that they're efficient enough to serve those purposes. The important thing is we understand and work with on all of the states where we work with all of the stakeholders, including county clerks, because they play a very integral role in the entire process of registering, titling a vehicle, liens, lien placement, all that kind of thing. And so that critical role needs to be preserved and maintained. The idea here is just to make it, as I've said before, extremely efficient through the use of technology, but all of the underlying authority and all of the revenue that's derived from these various vehicle titling processes remain in place. They remain intact. And our services and the other service providers who are in this space, in this industry, derive our income from fees that we charge to the dealers. We don't typically charge, or we don't at all, actually, I should say, charge any state for our products. And we work with those states, we build these products, and then we have these costs that are passed on to the dealers and lenders as part of that process. But important to just say, county clerks are an important fraud protection to ensure that these documents and the process and the transactions that are being conducted are absolutely 100% the way they should be, and they serve that role as a critical part of this process. And we wanted to give you some idea of, what do sample project milestones and timelines look like in terms of how do we approach this when we actually do partner with and work with states. First is kind of what we're doing right now, which is information gathering and working with various legislative committees, transportation cabinets, and other agencies within the state to just make sure what's required under the law. Do you need new laws? Do you need to modify certain laws? And so that's the first step in understanding where you need to go. And we've talked to Jason about this in the past, but we also then encourage lots of communication, excuse me, across many stakeholders, what you've already begun with this task force, including those important internal stakeholders, county clerks, transportation departments, if any other agencies in the state can place liens on vehicle titles, those types of things. We encourage all those stakeholders to be brought in. And then certainly the engagement of external stakeholders like DealerTrack, our competitors in the marketplace, who are third-party service providers or third-party processors, just to make sure that we've covered all the bases and checked all the boxes in terms of this is what it looks like. And then probably the next couple of steps here are super important. Developing those rules and regulations. Again, we build our systems to your rules based on what you require under the law, what you require administratively, but then also how does it fit into that workflow for the clerks. And then the development after you have the rules and regulations of the specifications, the technical document that goes into how do you actually build and develop these interfaces between Cavis and the service providers for the dealers and lien holders to use in addition to the county clerks. And then engaging the service providers for developing, testing, interfacing, what does that look like, those kinds of things. And then most importantly today, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Ohio titling process. This process is interesting in Ohio. It includes the dealers. It also includes other authorized users besides dealers, could be lenders, could be others. This system, the Ohio system, is known as the Automated Title Processing System. So a transaction at its base level starts out with the dealer preparing all of the application materials and documents required to submit a transaction. The dealer is required to input this information and data. We do it through DMS import and extraction as those transactions come through, which is a technical way of us to move data from one point to the other and make the dealers more efficient as they process these transactions. In Ohio, the dealers are required to scan all of those documents into the system with a desktop scanner that's available to them. And then that dealer will take those documents, attach them to the transaction. The dealer will submit through our software all of that application material over to the ATPS system at the state. The state system reviews it, looks at it to make sure that it meets basic criteria for a transaction. And then it gets transmitted over to the Clerk of Courts. And in the Clerk of Courts, they begin to review this application. They look at the documentation that's required, and they ask themselves a bunch of questions. Does it appear to be without fraud? Does it meet the law? Do I have all of the information and documents required? And is this transaction worthy of being approved? If it's not, the Clerk of Courts will reject it, and they will return to the dealer the transaction for correction with various notes about what's missing. Is it a document that's missing? Is it a field that's missing? Whatever's missing from that transaction that does not allow it to go forward, they will reject that and send it back. So let's assume for the moment that the transaction actually meets the law and that it actually meets all of the criteria that the county clerk of courts requires. If it does, then they will approve that transaction. They will begin to print the titles. Titles come out electronically and also in paper format, physical document format in Ohio. So the physical title will get printed, and then all of those documents will be provided back to the dealer. And then on the electronic side, all that title data, all those electronic documents, all the statuses get returned back to the Electrac system, excuse me, and then back to ultimately to the dealer for further processing. And so Ohio uses this Clerk of Courts process, has been using it for many, many years, and it is essential to this process. And the clerks play a very important role here to protect from fraud, to make sure that these transactions are worthy of being approved. And this is the same type of model that we believe would work in the Commonwealth of Kentucky for sure, that's out there. Interestingly enough, we just want to point out to you that the state of Ohio does operate several systems that exist within the state for dealers to process these transactions. A couple of them, one is free, run by the state, their own website. There is a process where service providers like Dealertrack can provide those services, and we compete with other competitors in the market for those. The state also has a no charge system that Dealertrack won the contract for, and we do charge the state for this program less than $1 for those transactions. But the majority of our clients are on our fee-for-service program that operates within the state, within the state of Ohio. And so this process is very efficient. We see processing times for this title work inside the dealer that sometimes once the title clerks inside the dealers understand exactly how to perform the transactions, what's required, we can see these transactions being done in just under 2 minutes. So it's a quick process for them. And then obviously the county clerk of courts takes their time to understand exactly what happens. But we typically can see same day turnaround on title processing from the clerk of courts as well, if all the documentation and material is there. So the system works very efficiently and works very quickly. Sorry, losing my voice. Jason, I will turn it back over to you in the room for any questions and answers.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So at this point, if you all have some questions you'd like to ask, well, we have our guests online as well. We'd be happy to field any questions.
Anyone here having questions? Representative Meredith, you have?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned there being other vendors in this space. How many other competitor vendors are there in your space? Similar providers to you all?
So in Ohio, we have 2 other competitors that are there. One that just recently finished programming. I don't believe they have any clients yet. And then the other one's been in the market space for a while. We do have about 75% of the market in Ohio. In our other states across the country, Sarah, if you want to jump in here, I would estimate on the electronic lien and title side, there are about 5 major national vendors. And then on the electronic registration and titling side, nationally, there's probably maybe 5. But there are a variety of regional providers. So there's some that may only have created their interface with one state across the, in that region. And so from that perspective, there may be, I'm going to say maybe up to a dozen more. But again, those are real regionally done. Some of them are just in big states. Some of them are uniquely inside of one state. Florida comes to mind. I think there's a couple of other states where the regionals are there as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. So one more question, if I may. And this is kind of a technical question. In some of the other states where you all deal with clerks, the county clerk's offices, do you all have an option available where you can title in the county of the dealer or the county of the residence of the buyer?
So in each of those states where we do process at the county level, we follow the law. So whatever the law requires and whatever's there, first and foremost, is the way we program those systems. I'll give you an example in Ohio. So in Ohio, that model is fully cross-border. So any dealer can do any transaction in any county in Ohio based on where their location is or even whatever county they choose. Our understanding, current law in Kentucky, is that the residence of the individual dictates a lot of those terms, and so from that perspective, we would design it to whatever your law requires. And I just want to, we don't do anything that is out of the normal for each of those states. So if you require us to do it in county of residence or county location of where the dealer is, whatever rules you set and establish are the rules that we follow. But we do have different states where there are different rules that allow for registration or titling in various jurisdictions, again, based on whatever rules they have in place.
Thank you very much.
Representative Bridges?
Thank you,
Would you
Mr.
have a
Chair.
question?
I think this question will probably go for Jason Wilson. Just a question on the cost of all this. To your knowledge, would this modernization cost qualify or fall under the ARPA funding?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. Our understanding is that it would under the state IT infrastructure system. So our understanding is that it in fact would qualify for ARPA.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else have any questions on any of this? I've got a couple of little questions for Mr. Pulliam. On the ELT and the ERT, would there be any benefit to just doing one of these systems versus the other, or do these need to work in coordination and conjunction with each other?
Yeah, we tend to advise jurisdictions to take the crawl, walk, run approach. Start off with a little bite of the apple at a time in order to achieve great things. In a lot of cases across the country that we've seen states develop, the typical path, not all have chosen this path, but the typical path we see is the beginning of an electronic lien and title program, which then has the lenders placing liens electronically, holding titles electronically, those kinds of things. And then moving on from there to electronic registration and titling. The registration and titling side of it, typically in each state, tends to be a more robust transaction that requires much more programming, much more development. And so just to give you an example, we see some electronic lien and title states that can be programmed in 6, 9, 12 months. Typical is about 9 to 12. On the registration side of it, because of the complexity, we see that development time lasting in a lot of cases 18 to 24 months for program development rules, those kinds of things. And so we have seen states take the ELT approach first and then do electronic reg and title. We encourage states that if you have a temp tag program, that you create a combined program that includes electronic registration and titling and temp tags, if that's what you need. And then lurking in the background here, we have lots of task force meetings and lots of other industry events that are occurring across the country. E-titling is sort of the next step, and this is the ability to have a completely paperless titling system, and then those electronic titles that are held eventually, there aren't any right now, but eventually those electronic titles will even be allowed to be transferred from one state to the other fully electronically. And so there's lots of innovation occurring out there, but our typical walk or crawl, walk, run approach that we advise is ELT, ERT, with a temp tag if that's what you require, and then moving on to a more robust full e-titling system. But again, each state's unique, and whatever programs you determine are the best for you under your rules and law, we work with you to figure out what that best approach would be. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. It's kind of important on the crawl, walk, run. Sometimes I think we go fire, ready, aim around here. I'm just going to see, you touched on most of my other questions. I was just checking my list off. Functionally speaking, if you just have the electronic lien part of this in place, how does that information get placed on a title?
So in our, it can be placed either by the lien holder or by a dealer. Sarah, do you want to jump in here and talk a little more about how those placements occur?
Sure, happy to. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it really depends on the functionality of your electronic lien and title program, but traditionally, lien filing is outside of the scope of electronic lien and title. We typically think of lien filing functionality as part of electronic registration and titling, because typically the dealers are filing those liens on behalf of the lenders. But we do have states, and I would say it's certainly a trend that we are seeing amongst our 25 ELT states, where that core ELT functionality is now including a lien filing transaction. And that could either be done by the lien holder, or the ELT program could be accessed by a dealer to do just the lien filing component, perhaps maybe not initially the full registration and titling, just that lien component, which would result in an electronic lien and title for that lien holder. So it really, I think the short answer is it depends on the scope of your program.
All right, thank you.
And one item to point out here for sure that we've seen in Kentucky is Kentucky is what we call in the industry as a non-title holding state. So the title actually goes to the individual consumer citizen of the state. And so from that perspective, what we see occur, it just happened in Michigan earlier this year when we implemented their ELT program. Almost all the states, I can't say all because there are a couple of outliers, but almost all of the states, when they do electronic lien and title and they start going down the road of these electronic programs, they change the status from non-title holding, where it goes to the consumer, to what we call a title holding state. And a title holding state is, if you own it, you control the title. And so from that perspective, with the lien holder having a lien on the title, they would be the owner of that vehicle. And so they would hold those titles. And then inside the ELT program, they hold them electronically. So there's typically no production of paper in that instance.
Thank you. And I really hate to ask this question, but I'm going to anyway. Does this process encompass the registration and titling of mobile homes as well?
So, Sarah,
I'm sorry, I didn't
hear
the last part of the question. Does it encompass
manufactured housing, mobile homes, manufactured housing?
It can. It just depends. It depends on the state rules. So we do electronic registration and titling for a variety of assets beyond just passenger vehicles. So in Pennsylvania, we do mobile homes, off-highway vehicles, vessels, and again, just a variety of vehicle types, depending on what the state is allowing.
And just to give you an idea, these systems are, again, as Sarah indicated, and I've talked about before, they're programmed to meet whatever your needs and your laws are. So if you allow those transactions to be done, you can. So I'll give you an example. In Connecticut, we can register vehicles through our system, I believe, up to 65 or 80,000 pounds. We do not do any international registration plan work, those kinds of things. Typically, that's already handled by another industry group outside of us. But we will do whatever transactions are allowed. Our core transactions are typically standalone registrations, standalone renewals, registration, titling, of course, transfers, renewals. I'm trying to think of some of the other core transactions that are out there. But whatever you allow is the way we build our system to meet that need that you have at the state level, and then working with the transportation cabinet just to figure out where do all these transactions fit and what can and can't be done.
So that was a lot of information, and for those, I might be guilty of not picking up on social cues sometimes. What I think you're trying to tell me is that we need to figure out how we want this to work from a statutory system, and then you'll build the database around it.
Yes, sir. Again, whatever your rules are at the county level, whatever your rules are at the state level, whatever regulations you build, and then of course, whatever the technical specifications are for each of these programs, we build our programs to match that. And so what it does for us is allow us to make sure that we're not wasting various individuals' time. So for example, when you require a 17-digit VIN, we do not let 16 digits come through, right? Because it's wrong. There's other fields like that. There's other things that occur in these systems, and what we do is we build them to match your criteria. And when we do, we prevent insufficient or other transactions from even getting through the system without having the minimum amount of information and the minimum amount of documents that are there. Are there mistakes that get made? Sure. But if we can eliminate sending even 100 transactions a day across the state, it saves an enormous amount of time, not only for the dealers inside their internal operations, but also at the county level. So when you talk about modernizing and making things more efficient, our ability to meet your criteria and to prevent things from happening that shouldn't eliminates a lot of those issues and errors that happen both upstream and downstream. And so from that perspective, it just adds that much more value to the system because of the way it's built to meet your requirements.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Representative Meredith?
This one is a little more specific, piggyback on that previous question from a technical perspective. In any of the other states that you all work with, do you all have a system where you are collecting ad valorem and property taxes for local entities, not just the state?
So we do capture a variety of taxes and fees that are provided over. Let's just stick with the Ohio example. So the Ohio example, we pay whatever titling fees. There's a $15 title fee. There's a $5 dealer title flip fee that are separate. And then there's also the taxes, sales tax, other issues. We collect across the country tens of millions of dollars each day. And we transfer those funds to either the state jurisdictions, if those are the rules, or to the local county jurisdictions. So in Ohio, we process those transactions, and then we will debit the dealer's account, and then we deposit that money into the county clerk of court's accounts based on those days. And then we provide reconciliation reports and ACH reports just so that all the parties can make sure that all the fees and taxes are accounted for. In Ohio, we're just entering some beta testing right now to do registration in Ohio. And so those fees have to go to deputy registrar's offices because that operation is outside of it. And so Ohio will be a twofold process for us for debiting and crediting various entities that are at the local level. But then in states like California and others, all the funds go to the state. And so in this case, in Kentucky, whatever funds are required to be put into the county's accounts is where we would deposit those monies based on the rules.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Senator Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a state that you all can think of in your current network that would be most similar to Kentucky that we could look at for somewhat of a model legislation?
Sarah, I think Ohio is probably the closest model. And again, the Ohio model is title only. We built registrations outside of the state system in partnership with another association in Ohio, which is unique and innovative from that perspective, and we're in beta testing now. The other state that does title only and then also has a registration component to it would be Indiana, and their program's been up and running for a long time. The only major difference with Indiana is that it's not county-based, it's actually state-based. So the information goes over there. Sarah, I think Georgia's county-based.
Georgia is also county-based.
Um,
We're currently in the process of developing electronic registration and titling with Colorado, which is also county-based. So the county clerks in Colorado are responsible for the titling of vehicles. And so we are in the process of standing a system up there as well. So they may be another good state to look at as you're on this journey.
So Georgia, Ohio, and Colorado.
Yes, sir.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chairman Meredith?
Jason, I think this one's probably towards you. From your all's perspective, from the dealer's perspective in Kentucky, obviously the titling and lien portion of this is extremely important from your all's perspective. Is the registration piece of this as important to you all? I could see that on an initial registration process, but the yearly annual registration, I don't know that that's all that concerning in this process.
Appreciate that question very much. I think ultimately, to Dan Pulliam's point earlier, this is that crawl, walk, run thing. So I think what's vital to the dealers right now is starting with that title program. Now, ultimately, would it be great to be able to offer registrations at the time of a vehicle delivery? Absolutely. And one of the benefits to that, which again, speaking of that Virginia model, is when you have that capability, literally everything that with that transaction occurs in real time. So as a consumer, you're buying your vehicle, you do the paperwork, you have your registration, you leave the dealership. If you were to get pulled over by a police officer, they run the tag and they'll see that, oh, okay, this is that you are the owner of that car. So now, depending on the state, but that is ultimately, ideally where you would like to go, where all these things sort of happen in real time. But initially, to your point, Mr. Chairman, we would want to start slowly and build to that.
And this is probably a follow-up on that question towards Dan. Are there any states where you have a system basically where you have the titling lien portion of this and the initial registration from the dealer, but you may not have something for the annual registration renewal?
So yes, so we have some states where it's just the initial registration that's done as part of the process. We have other states where they can do a standalone registration. They can do a renewal. So there's lots of opportunities where each of these types of transactions can serve a need for the users in the system. And so from that perspective, that's where we really work as a stakeholder with the state to figure out, what transactions do you need immediately? Do you want to hold off and do some later? Again, crawl, walk, run. And we work with those. One of the interesting things that I will point out as you run through this process with the task force and your discussions with the transportation cabinet and the county clerks is we've seen some states over the past year and a half or so who have started to do things differently, adding transaction types, adding the ability for dealers to do various kinds of things within their dealership. Part of that came as a result, obviously, of the pandemic. And some states realized that there were hard stops on a number of transaction types where because offices were closed and those kinds of things. So we've seen an expansion generally in the number and type of transactions that can be done. And again, it was based on the state changing their rules and updating them based on what they saw. So for example, in New York, you had to collect sales tax, but you had to go to a county office or you had to go to a DMV office. And the issue there was we had tens of thousands of transactions that we couldn't process because they didn't have the sales tax collected. So New York updated their rules and regulations and allowed us to begin to collect that sales tax so that there wasn't a hard stop. So that in the event that they had closures or those kinds of things, that those transactions could continue to go forward electronically to ensure that nurses and doctors who needed to get new vehicles because their car died in the middle of the pandemic, that they could actually do that without a hard stop in that transaction. And so I would encourage you that as you look at the impact of the pandemic and what it had on your operations, to also include some of those discussions as you look at what transactions are allowable and how do you do them. We work with the dealers a lot. We work with the lenders a lot. One of the other kinds of industries we work with are fleet management companies. So your enterprises, hertz, those kinds of companies. And in a lot of states, we have the ability to allow them to also do the registration of their new vehicles that they acquire, but then also to do renewals and those kinds of things through the system. And again, it just makes it all that much more efficient. You have fewer in-person activities that have to be done for tens of thousands of transactions. And so those are the kinds of things that, we will look at as we begin our discussions with the task force and with the transportation cabinet.
And I only went down that rabbit hole because I see the scenario here, and we have talked about it on the property record side, where we still want to make the clerk's offices available in person for those people who would be wanting to still engage that way. And I just think that for the most part, when you're talking about a solution that's going to be paid for by the end-use consumer here or whoever, the dealers would obviously link up to that like a bank or like a title company would on the property record side, where your individual customer is likely not going to do that, just like they wouldn't if they were doing a cash sale on a piece of property or something like that. So just wanted to kind of get your all's perspective on that.
I had a couple of follow-up questions to take us a little farther down your hole. In any of these other states that have the electronic registration, do you have any data on how many people actually use that for subsequent annual registrations?
Off the top of my head, I don't. We'd have to dig into that and do a little research. And again, some of these are new. Connecticut's a good example where Connecticut just put this in place this year, where they allowed standalone renewals to be done within our system. And so that data set's growing. Sarah, I don't know if you have an idea.
Yeah, I don't. And I would just say that in the 16 states where we have the full electronic registration and titling, it's the minority of states that allow for registration renewal. We think of the initial registration as being a core transaction, but not the renewal. And so it's only a handful of our states that would allow for that registration renewal. We tend to think of that as a more consumer-facing transaction and something that the consumer engages with either the county clerk or the department on an annual basis. Those states that have incorporated it into their electronic registration and titling programs are really doing so for kind of two reasons. The first is to typically accommodate fleet companies, because those entities do have a need to do bulk renewals of registrations on an annual basis, as well as that states are beginning to open up that transaction to dealers, really just to do as a courtesy for their customer that may be coming in to get an oil changed or their vehicle serviced around the time their registration is due. Perhaps the dealer notices that their registration is due, and they have the ability to offer that service to their customer during that interaction. But I would certainly say it is not, from our standpoint, considered a core transaction, and really kind of just, again, not available in the majority of states where we operate.
I would also echo Sarah's sentiments, is that we're looking at this at a time of purchase scenario from the dealer standpoint, ideally. So that's our position as well.
I had one other follow-up on this, and I can honestly say I'd thought about the different angles of this, and this is something that just occurred to me when we were going through this. I'm assuming it gets dangerous sometimes when you do that. I understand. I'm assuming that with ELT that there's a part of the program built in for lien holders to do their releases once these liens are paid off. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That is correct. And our product for the lien holders allows them to do that. And so that process creates lots of efficiencies and a lot quicker lien releases than what I think you're probably seeing right now in your manual paper operations. And that just creates another level of efficiency. And the one thing I will point out in Ohio, as you look at that example, Ohio allows dealers to hold their titles electronically. So when the lien holder releases that title and they release it to that third party payoff, the dealer who paid off that loan, taking that vehicle in trade, those dealers are allowed to flip those titles into their name and hold them electronically without printing a paper title. So the suppression of that printing of the title actually not only makes their flip into another consumer when they sell it much more efficient, but it also reduces the amount of paper they have to print, all those kinds of things. And so from that perspective, if you're looking at designing your system, those are options as well. The dealers do pay a title fee when they do that flip, but it's not as high as the regular title fee where they have to print a paper title along with it. So, but again, lots of opportunity here and lots of innovation going on around the country right now. We've probably had, Sarah, conversations with 10 other states about new electronic programs or innovations. And so from that perspective, I think you're in a really unique position because you're in the catbird seat. You have the ability to see what everybody else is sort of thinking about, but you also have the experience that everybody that came before you and to rely on that experience. And so from that perspective, I think you're in a really good position.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on this? If not, we sure appreciate your time today, and we may have some follow-up questions that we roll back to you at a later date. With that, next up, we'd like to bring up the folks from the Transportation Cabinet to give us a nice little update on Cavis. So, Ms. Stout, I don't know if you're in the room. Or...
Yes.
Oh, there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's fine.
Hi, I'm Heather Stout. I'm the Executive Director of IT for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. And I just wanted to thank KADA for coming and presenting as well, because it was really interesting for me to hear about it. And it's very exciting to see the possibilities. I think the Commonwealth is starting to consider these types of changes as positive and willing to embrace them. The pandemic has kind of pushed us forward in a lot of ways, and it's exciting to see that this is one of those ways. So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about that and working with everyone on that going forward. I want to introduce John Eiler. He is the project manager for the Cavis modernization effort, and he is going to be presenting the status of that project right now, and I'll be available for questions as well.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to present my screen, and hopefully whenever I do so, you all can see that. Can anyone see the Cavis program update slides?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can in the room.
Oh, wonderful. Good afternoon now. I appreciate everybody's time today to give an update on the Cavis program. One of the unique opportunities that was given here was to take the legacy system that's been in the Commonwealth for quite some time now and implement a program that modernizes how the county clerks operate and the processes that they work through. And as many of you all know, it's a iterative process in which we've developed a ton of functionality and delivered a lot of value to the county clerks and to the citizens of the Commonwealth. Today, we're just going to give you a high-level overview of the things that have happened over the past 5.5 years with the modernization effort. But first, just for those that don't know, the Cavis application is the program that we're actually decommissioning the legacy system that has been around since about 1979, 1980, and has been the backbone of title and registration for the Commonwealth over the past 40 years. And with that comes a lot of opportunities for us actually to modernize the offices. I know there was a lot of opportunities that was brought up prior to this presentation, and I can see a lot of future benefits that are going to leapfrog and springboard off of this Cavis implementation once we finish the next module in December of 2022. Some of the things that we've actually taken on and completed thus far would be the print-on-demand decal and the real-time scanning in the county clerk's offices. That allowed for decals to be printed at the offices. It also allowed to really step away from that paper process and having tons of paper on hand in the offices and scanning that into an electronic format. Also, we transitioned to a web renewal enhancement process. through 2 incremental phases where we were allowing the citizens to actually renew their vehicles online. And that streamlined in 2016 to encompass more opportunities. And as we move forward with Cavis, that'll only increase once we fully modernize that core system. Next, we had the foundation for the web-based application that Cavis is based upon. We implemented that with the disabled placard release. That allowed us to move from a vehicle-centric model to a customer-centric model, while also leveraging a web-based application for the county clerks to use. Then we consolidated every county, 120 counties within the Commonwealth, to provide them one statewide point of sale solution, bringing everybody on the same page for financial and accounting purposes, as well as their daily activities, processing over $1 billion per year. And then in 2019, we brought in a new vehicle type, laying out that foundation so that we could title, register, renew vehicles within the Cavis application, setting the stage for our future implementation with all vehicles targeting December 2022. In between the boats release and our future release, we also decided to decommission and implement a new inventory solution that will help streamline the process and ease that transition whenever we move to our full implementation for all vehicles. And then we, as many people know already, we implemented the flat plate solution in July 2021 with a third-party vendor to help better serve the citizens of the Commonwealth in getting them their plates in a timely fashion. So the next module that we're releasing, and what we do, we call these modules because we take functionality and we bundle it. And what we want to do with those bundles is we want to make it manageable whenever we hand it off to the county clerks, and so that they can adopt and utilize the system in a timely fashion with little or no impact to the citizens of the Commonwealth. And the next module will be every other vehicle type, cars and trucks and motorcycles and trailers, mobile homes. All of that will be bundled together and with our target release of December 2022. And based on a lot of the feedback that we're getting, we're actually, people want us to go faster. And I understand that whenever you start getting something that's really easy to use, it's really better for the citizen as far as support. And whenever you have this great tool in your hands, you obviously want to have something like that to be able to use sooner and quicker. And in order to do that, we've actually taken some steps to streamline the project process. We've implemented more swim lanes for functionality to be developed. We've also taken a unique stance in which the county clerks were extremely gracious and on board, and they've allowed us to actually bring frontline clerks closer to the project team so that we can actually get that hands-on real-time feedback to questions and concerns and comments and interpretations, so that we can build a system that is totally customized and configurable to what the county clerks need. Some of the unique opportunities within the Commonwealth revolve around the multitude of opportunities that you have whenever you're servicing 120 different counties of all different sizes. And so the County Clerk Association and the county clerks decided to address our need and allow for full-time county clerks to come onto the team and be an integral part of our project daily life cycles. And so that's actually given us a tremendous amount of momentum and allowed us to reduce that tack time between question and answer that allows us to go from a very vague and hazy kind of interpretation to a very clear, concise, and function-ready development process. And so I just wanted to say I appreciate all of the county clerks and their efforts that they've done for us in that regard, because that is exponentially giving us the more opportunities to deliver the functionality that they need. One of the things that was brought up before, and I think it goes across the board, especially whenever you're talking about 120 different counties, you're talking about taking disparate processes and making it similar across the board, regardless of who you interact with. We're talking about standardization across the highest level, so that whenever something as simple as training on a system, every county would do the same processes the same way, through the same process. And we can build training around that, and it can be shareable, and it can be leveraged among small, medium, and large counties. The processes, while they are standardized, we also understand that not every county is the same. Owsley County doesn't necessarily always operate the same way Jefferson County does, and vice versa. There's different needs for different counties. So while we are standardizing processes, we're making sure that we can configure those processes to fit the needs of those counties. And then whenever we mentioned point of sale solution earlier, we improved the processes for end of day reconciliations, midday sweeps, non-sufficient funds management. Those were actually some very disparate and difficult processes for many of the counties. And we were able to actually get in there and understand the why of what they were trying to do, and then build a standardized process around that so that everybody could be on the same page. And another just tidbit of information on that, whenever you have 120 counties and you have, elected officials that enter those offices, not every elected official that goes into a county clerk's office has the benefit of being a county clerk prior to that. So we wanted to make sure that we were standardizing the operations so that whenever you have a new leader in that county, that they can go in there and they can still serve the citizen, because that's the number one priority. And we wanted to make sure that it was easy to transition, and that the system that they have in to serve those citizens was not the biggest impediment to their day. And so far, we've been extremely successful with that. One of the other major benefits that we had with the Cavis implementation thus far is the data integrity. Data is the key to everything that happens within the system, because data is a key construct of what a customer is and what they own, and if they're delinquent, and what they have within their portfolio of vehicles. And so whenever we were moving from the vehicle-centric model to the customer-centric model, we were able to leverage a lot of the technology that was already established. Something as simple as a customer coming in and we scan their driver's license. That driver's license has a lot of personal information that we can pull from, that's been validated and verified by another entity, that is extremely structured, clean, and valid. And so we take that information, and that's how we start to do the cleanup process. Also, we allowed 5 years worth of data versus just one. That ease to access usable information instead of just raw data was extremely important to the end users, and we made sure that that happened. And along with that, fraud, misuse of information, we make sure that we lock down personally identifiable information. We make sure that you can't just change information without it being validated. We make sure that we track every single thing that happens within the system, and we can go back there for audit purposes or for research purposes to make sure that we are addressing issues if they come up. And then customer accounts, we're making sure that we're cleaning up those customer accounts and making sure that whenever you come into the county clerk's office and you want to renew your vehicles, that we can pull up one customer account and we can see everything underneath your account, so that it makes it extremely easy and user-friendly for the county clerk as well as the citizen. As far as efficiency and effectiveness, whenever the citizen comes in to renew vehicles, one of the major improvements that we've made is that if you have multiple vehicles that need to be renewed at the same time, and I know this may seem like common sense, but we built the system to make sure that this can happen. If you have 5 vehicles, we want you to be able to check out one time. We set it up so that the county clerk, whenever you walk into that office and you have multiple vehicles that you want to renew, whether it's all, some, or partial, or just one, we can easily click that, put it into the shopping cart, check you out, and you'll be on your way with new registrations. That went from multiple single in-series transactions to upwards of hundreds of vehicles could be renewed at once. While not a lot of people have hundreds of vehicles, the opportunity is there, and we can check those all out at one time, saving tons of time in regards to those transactions. Also, one of the biggest problems that were faced by the county clerks was onboarding new people whenever they hire people. The legacy system was quite cumbersome to understand and learn. And so we reduced that effectiveness of a new hire from 3 to 6 months to less than 1 day. You can put someone on the front line with the Cavis application and utilize that intuitive interface to title and register vehicles with a very high level understanding of what the system is. And as long as you know what you have to do, as far as like, am I registering this vehicle? Am I titling this vehicle? Am I transferring this vehicle? You can do that through prompts on the screen. We also perform multiple validations to make sure that while you're doing that, the barriers are put up so that the risk reduction to errors are in place and that you're doing the right thing. The validations are there. We also increase the opportunity to identify and collect unpaid non-assessed taxes. And what that means is that basically in the old system, everything is vehicle centric. So if your customer record, so to speak, may have disparate records within the legacy system, we bundled those together based on key criteria through our data cleansing and conversion, as well as clerk interaction, to make sure that all your vehicles are under one account. So whenever you come in, if you owe on a vehicle, you know immediately. We're also leveraging, as we should, reduction in paper. We can email receipts. We don't have to print everything out. We enabled automated cash drawers to make it easier for the frontline clerks. We're auto assigning districts for property value administration. It increased visibility across organizations. Before, it was extremely siloed. Motor vehicle licensing, the county clerks, Department of Revenue, property value administrators, Kentucky State Police, Fish and Wildlife, they all had their own area, and you did not have any visibility into the other areas. So there was a lot of roadblocks or speed bumps into having open and transparent communications across organizations. And now they're in one system. It's role-based access control, there's segregation of duties, but they all interact within the same system. So there's reduced overhead to having a transaction between MVL and say the PVAs. So it's real time, they have that interactions. Also, just kind of some information that I thought was fairly interesting. Total sales for fiscal year 2021, we had over $1 billion in total sales, which is an outstanding number across the Commonwealth of all the transactions that are flowing through the Cavis application currently. We're still heavy on checks. We have $693 million in checks. Cash is still prevalent with 10%, and then credit cards is just slightly above cash at 12%. One of the numbers that I'm proud of is just the amount of citizens that we serve. 4.6 million citizens come in and are impacted by this application throughout the year. And our primary goal is to serve those citizens and make sure that they can get in and out of those offices and be as satisfied as you can be while you're paying your taxes and renewing your vehicles. So the project status, right now we're working towards a goal of December 2022. We are on track and on target with that date. You can see from the right-hand side, I just wanted to kind of give you a visual overview. Those numbers represent development hours. All of the green is what has been completed thus far, and the red is what is remaining in what we call Module 4. Module 4 is all the remaining vehicles. Every 3 weeks, we complete more and more of this, and that red reduces. And just the general overview for this is that we're on time and on target right now with our projected delivery of December 2022. And then the Cavis budget, we still are under the total $25 million that was originally allocated to the previous project. We are going to still remain under that whenever we deliver December 2022. And just to reiterate, we are on target for December 2022. We're on budget for December 2022. And right now, we do not have any major impediments to delivering the core functionality for that delivery so that we can actually turn off Avis and solely rely on Cavis to be our source of truth for all title and registration activities. And that was the last slide that I had. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Anyone have any questions? Chairman Meredith, you got any questions on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several, and I'm going to start by getting on my soapbox for a moment. I am completely supportive of nearly everything in this process that we're moving towards, with the exception of one thing. Frankly, I think that flat license plates are terrible. I'm a car guy. They are ugly. They look fake. They look like something you print off your home computer and printer in your basement somewhere, and I hate them. And I'm one of only probably 2 people in the House of Representatives that voted against them, so I'm going to express my displeasure with that right now.
We apologize.
Moving on to real questions, though. With regard to, and I think you said you're on schedule for the December 2022 rollout date, end Avis, start Cavis fully at that point in time. And this is kind of a 2-stage question. How likely do you feel that you're going to meet that target, number one? I know you said you're on schedule right now, but how likely do you think it is to meet that target? And I know you said there are challenges with trying to move that forward, but with the current Avis failures that we've had weeks on end here lately, is there any way to speed that up to try to deal with the Avis failure issues?
So the first part, I'm highly confident that we're going to make the December 2022 date. There's a lot of tools in the toolkit for us to make sure that we make that. Right now, and just one of those things is we decided to take our project and turn it into multiple different sub projects, working them in parallel. And so what that did is that helped us actually shorten that timeline to make sure that we're getting all that functionality. And that is coupled with what I was talking about in the very beginning, where we brought county clerks into our team. And so that they're literally sitting with us, well, figuratively because we're remote, but they're working with us every day to get those answers so that we can deliver that functionality. And every day we're getting that feedback to make sure that we're on delivering what they need. Because as soon as we know that they're getting what they need, we can move on to the next thing, and then move on to the next thing, and then move on to the next thing. And that's why I'm highly confident in the December 2022.
And if I could address, I'm sorry, John, I thought you were done.
I'm done.
If I could address the Avis issues, there have been 5 or 6 issues in the past month that have taken the clerks down for an hour or multiple hours each event. And we are working very closely with COT and IBM and one of our other vendors, ITI, to correct these issues. And if they do arise, to make them resolvable much quicker. We've had some delays we shouldn't have had. There's been quite a few variety of issues, I should say. It's not been consistent. So I assure you, we think it's very unacceptable that those issues have been occurring as well, and are doing everything that we can to prevent those and to make them to be more responsive when they do occur.
Well, and I asked that question partially because, like I said, the failures that have been going on, but also because I know kind of the timeline of Cavis has been all over the place through the years. I think, it seems odd to say this now, but I've been in the General Assembly for 11 years. And in the 11 years that I've been here, I have a pretty high level of seniority at this point. But I think Cavis probably predates my time in the General Assembly by at least 5 or 10 years maybe. And it's just been a long-term 15, 20-year project, and I'm glad we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and going to be able to get this thing up and rolling. The final question that I have for right now, though, is with regard to Cavis when it goes live in 2022, will there be a potential for a plug-in in that system that would allow a system like the dealer track system or one of the competitors to be able to interface back and forth with it, or is that something that you all could get added to that fairly quickly?
Well, and John, you may have something to add, but I think the opportunity to have an ELT and ERT system integrated into Cavis is a wonderful idea. And I definitely think that in the future we will have that. Now, I don't know enough about what it will take to integrate to say how long it would take. So I wish I could tell you that. I can just tell you that it's a great idea and we want to do it. And I know the clerks are also very interested in doing it as well. So I don't think we can fit it into our existing timeline, but it's something that we can review and work with the vendor on and make sure that we're ready to go once we implement Cavis and can start doing some development integration with a vendor for those things.
Follow up on that, and this may be for you, Ms. Stout, or it may be for John. Could you, and this is not something I'm going to put you on the spot with right now, but could you all do some research and get some cost estimates of what it would cost and how long it would take to get something like that up and running, and report that back to the committee before the end of the year, maybe before the end of the, we've got, I think, an October meeting and a November meeting still before we finish up.
Yes, I have on my list already when they were speaking to get a meeting set up with them to just have some initial conversations about how they contract with other states. I don't know if we would have to put something out for bid. There's just a lot of unknowns around those processes that we need to work through. So certainly I would think by the end of the year, we would have a better idea on what our process would have to be in a general very high level timeline.
And I may be off base here, but it seems to me that as long as the plug-in is available, that's what they need, whereas their contract's going to be with the dealers or the end users that they're contracting with, but it just needs to have the ability for those systems to interface with each other. So that's probably a Cavis vendor question, what that add-on would cost.
Well, there is not a Cavis vendor. It's all done in-house at Transportation Cabinet with my resources.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on this? I have one somewhat random question for John. Back on the slide where you're talking about the impact and benefits of Cavis, when you talk about the breakdown of the $1 billion, you have it broken down by check, cash, and credit. Where's the other approximately 11% come from if it's not check, cash, and credit? Is any sort of electronic fund transfer or anything like that?
Yes, sir. It's ACHs and just other types of transactions that, for lack of better words, weren't as exciting as checks, cash, and credit cards.
We think anytime revenue comes in, it's exciting.
Yes, sir.
That's
Noted.
true.
I'll make sure.
Appreciate it. Thank
Other
you.
category.
That's right.
Yes.
Anyone else have anything on that? Anyone online? I hadn't asked. Is anyone online that wants to ask any questions? Okay. All right. With that being said, I appreciate your time today and appreciate you following up with us on that information as well.
Certainly. Thank you.
All right. I think that's all we have today. I want to note that our next meeting is October 20th at 11 right now. And the next order of business is adjournment. So without any further ado,